Should we start, Manoj, or is there a delay?
Manoj, unmute. Manoj, unmute.
We cannot hear you. Please unmute yourself.
Manoj, I think some issue is there in your audio system. Anyway, Madam, I am Parthendu Singh from Department of Commerce, co-coordinator of the course. I am an alumni of your department, ma'am. I did my B.Ed in 1998.
Oh, great, sir. It's great to hear.
So, Manoj, I think your audio is okay now. No, still not. Okay, so anyway, dear participants, today we are having Madam Professor Madhu Kushwaha ji. She is a professor in the faculty of education, BHU, and she is going to speak on ensuring equity in learning. And she will be handling next session also. And next session will be myths and reality of online education in India. So these two topics she is going to deliberate on. She's a senior faculty member at Banaras University. So, madam, now time is yours. We may start.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Parthendu Singh, Professor Manoj Varmaji, and dear participants. As Professor Singh said that the first session would be dedicated to ensuring equity in learning. Let me share my screen. So is it visible now to all of you?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, so thank you. Whenever like sometimes there is an internet issue or like my audio or video is fluctuating, please let me know. Otherwise,
Sure.
We'll start ensuring equity in learning. As you know that there's a lot of focus on equity, how to ensure equity, because equity is a fundamental precondition to ensure equality in learning or equality of educational achievements. So that are the concerns very much resonated in the NEP recommendations also. So it's a very pertinent time to talk about what is equity and how it differs from equality and why it is very important to get the right meaning of equity. You know, most of the time I'm not saying that the people don't understand the concept of equity, but sometimes the explanation which is given for equity is not doing justice with the right concept of equity. So we'll start our session, and I structured my presentation like before going to the nitty-gritty of the equity, we must get the right meaning of equity. And then we'll talk about sources of inequity in learning, like what are the sources which contributes or which are responsible to create inequitable learning or inequity in learning in Indian context. Obviously, we'll talk about Indian school system particularly. And then we'll talk briefly about NEP recommendations on equity and inclusion, and why is it a repeated recommendation, like previous commissions, educational commissions also talked about equity and how it faltered and where are the cracks and the loopholes and why we did not address this thing. And the last but not the least, I'll talk about little bit about how to address the problem. Like the problem can be addressed at the three level, like policy level, state level, and the individual teachers level. So that would be really pertinent for you people, as you people are teachers working in higher education sector, and most of you will be working in teacher education sector also, or in a school education sector also. So let's start. I'm sure that almost all of you have seen these these or related kind of images in social media, in WhatsApp forwards or in Facebook, explaining this difference between equity and equality with the help of this image. And this image is like there's a baseball match and there are 3 persons trying to watch the map, but they differ in their height, but all of them got the one box to stand on. It's like equal treatment. And after the equal treatment, they are not able to watch. At least one person is not able to watch even after getting the equal treatment. And in the second image, which is written as the equity, termed as a captioned as a equity, you can see that the people are getting the number of boxes as per their requirement. And they are now all of them can watch the baseball match. It's a great, it's an image given by Greg Frohol. It's a great image, but I have some problem and reservation with this image. Like it is okay when you, life is not a baseball match. It is okay when you compare the thing that watching baseball match, but like if you want to understand this concept of equity and equality in terms of educational setting, which is agenda of today's deliberation, is that like if you extend this example towards like special treatment or special assistance to certain students, you know, or the special funding to certain area schools, or the schools in which the marginal section students are enrolled. So if you try to extend this example, like if you try to extend this example to understand the educational equity, there is a problem. Like as per this image says that equal treatment is not fair treatment and it doesn't solve the purpose. As far as this message is concerned, it is okay. But if you see the location of inequity is not in the system, it is in the person themselves. Like some person or person, particularly 2 persons, are not able to see the match, or they, like if you imply this this thing as educational equity, the some person are not able to achieve educational attainment because they are shorter in height. You know, they are incapable of learning. So the location of initial inequity is in the student themselves. Because as for this image, some people cannot attain the same equity because they are shorter, metaphorically shorter, or they lack the academic capabilities or intellectual capacities. But we know for sure that the intellectual capacities and capabilities are normally distributed. So this image locate the source of initial inequity among the students of the deprived section or among the students of the marginal communities. This image never ever talks about why this inequality or inequity emerges. So as far as height is concerned, this image can be implied. But if you want to understand this image metaphorically and try to understand other kind of inequity, there is the problem with this image. Because as I said that, it says that the source of equity or inequity is among the students themselves or among the people themselves, those who are the victim in a social system. So they themselves are responsible for the low learning level, or metaphorically they are shorter kind of thing. And this image doesn't address the structural inequality, you know, structural inequity, why certain area schools are like in a dilapidated condition, why certain group of people they need more assistance, language coaching or technological gadget training or assistance, because there is a unequal distribution of resources among the various sections of the population. So the inequity has a very structural dimension, but this image never ever talks about that, the structural dimension. And the baseball fence is equal, and the boxes are the way it has been represented. It never addressed the historical nature of the operation, the caste-based operation or gender-based operation. That's why this kind of inequity itself in the first place originated, And this image is an example of the deficit thinking. Like, it blames the victims of the operation. And as I said, that if you go to our example of the certain students of the marginal section, those who need special assistance, they themselves are responsible because they are metaphorically shorter for their own situation. So that's why, though this image says that they need more assistance in terms of 2 boxes, but it never ever addressed the real problem of why they need more assistance, and why certain people don't need assistance. And that's why there is a lot of silence about the caste and gender-based operation, which this image makes that operation invisible, the historical nature of that operation invisible. I was searching. I was not happy with the image, and I was searching internet, and I was saying there must be some people, those who have seen this image as a like the way I'm seeing and I'm perceiving the problem. I did not feel like easy, and I think that something is not good. And then I got this another image on internet itself, and the same the artist used the same example of the baseball match, but and the 2 captions, equality and equity, are there. But here you can see that all the 3 persons, those who are depicted, those who cannot see the match, some cannot see the match, or one is barely seeing the match, they are of the same height, So metaphorically speaking, the students are of the same, almost same or equitable intellectual capacities. But the field on which they are standing, their social capital is not the same. Some students have more capital, more social capital in terms of the parents' education, in terms of the class background, in terms of the exposure to technology and language. And some students are on the disadvantage level on all these accounts. They have very less social capital or no social capital at all. As you can see that on the field where they are standing, it's not equal, it's not equal, so unequal. The people start, when they start their educational journey, they are not equal. And when you have less social capital, you face more structural, social structural inequality or hurdles. As you can see, the fence is not of the equal size. So the people, those who have a privileged background, those who have more social capital, they face less structural barriers or obstacles or disadvantage, because the fence size, or the fence is here a kind of metaphor for a social structural barriers or obstacles. So their barriers in front of them, social structural barriers, are less in comparison to the other students. So in the second image, you can see that the students are of the equal height. So it addresses all the problems which were there in the previous image. Like, it talks, it never ever says that the students need special assistance because they are themselves inferior, or they are shorter, they are of equal capacities. Since they do not start on the level playing field, the field is not equal for them. Certain students start schooling with a lot of structural, a lot of disadvantage at home and family and society level. And in same proportion, they face a lot of barriers, a lot of disadvantage. So that's why location of inequity is not among students, but location of inequity is in the socio-structural operation or the socio-historical, political, economic conditions which are there. So that's why they need more assistance. So they need more assistance not because they are inferior, they need more assistance because there was injustice, So, and it creates a lot of difference when you explain the thing like that, because in the previous image, when you say the certain students need special assistance because they lack capacities, then there is a charity kind of thing, and there's anger also. Okay, why the state is doing something more them, or why do they need special assistance? Or the people, those who are getting special assistance, that group, they also receive the special assistance in form of reservation, in forms of fee-free-ship, in forms of any special coaching. They receive it with a very low self-esteem, because they think that, oh, I am receiving this thing because I'm inferior. So it's a double whammy, you know. It destroys the self-esteem of the person, those who receive it, as well as the students, those who are not receiving it, or the group, those who are those who see that, oh, I'm not getting, or I'm getting less in comparison to that group. They feel that it is their right which is being snatched away from them. So we have to, as a teacher or teacher educator, we must try to not only understand ourselves the right meaning of equity and equality, but also we have to communicate as many forum as we are with our students, with in conferences, we should write and all those things. We can do that. So we must talk about the structural advantages and disadvantages, as I say that, for certain groups. And we should locate the sources of disadvantage in the social system. And we must talk about the achievement gap and the opportunity gap. Mostly we talk about achievement gap, like certain students lack their achievement is less than certain groups, but we never ever contextualize the achievement, because achievement happens in a social context where you get the opportunity, or where you don't get the opportunity, vice versa kind of thing. So we must focus more on the opportunity gap rather than achievement gap, because achievement gap is a result, and opportunity gap is the process through which that achievement gap you are seeing as a result, or the final product. And when you address the opportunity gap, you address the inequality. And so that opportunity gap is about the entire debate about the equity is about the opportunity gap. Come to the next section of this talk. We must, there are people, when I do talk to them in conference or in symposia, people say that, no, there is no equity, there is no inequality, no inequity. And because, oh, there is, there's equal right, and people have the same rights to entry and admission, etc., etc. But we must think about the sources of inequity and its result. Then only we will be able to see it properly. And there are a lot of ample data, state government data, and the Government of India data, which proves which itself is an evidence to show that there are the sources of inequity in learning, and these are the same sources which are the sources of inequity in society also. And these are the caste, class, and gender and its intersection, because they never ever operates in an isolation. So these are the sources or the markers of your social status, or the structure of advantage or disadvantage you have, and its intersections affects your final status in a society, and that the amount of social capital you have, and it also affects the structure of advantage or advantage you will have in an educational setting. Like if your parents are educated, so as a child, when you start your schooling, you are in advantage position than the child whose parents are not educated. Why so? Like the same, like you can extend it. You have to see the structure of privileges. Like if your parents are educated in English, or they themselves got the English medium education. So, and the child is in the English medium school, the child will have a kind of advantage in comparison to the child whose parents are were educated in a vernacular or in other Indian languages other than the English, So if you are, and these sources of inequity is has a very structural nature, and its intersections affects the kind of inequality or inequity you see in educational setting. Class divide in learning, like the students, those who are getting more good quality education, are the students, those whose parents are able to afford to buy the education. The private schools are the fee-paying schools. So, and most of the time, I'm not saying all the time, but most of the time, the government schools are facing the perception problem that they are not functioning well, they are not good quality schools. And if you are educated in government schools, your life chances will be not as good as the person who had education from the private English medium schools. So the class divide in learning is apparently very clear. Who goes to which kind of school, and it can be addressed only with the increased government funding on the schooling. Like if consider and imagine a scenario, and there are examples in the world where the largely public funded school system is there, and majority of population, say 95 to 99% population, they go to the government schools, and only one or exception 1-2% go to the elite private schools. So in that society where the government schooling or the government schools are, or the public schooling is a publicly funded or state funded, you will see the very less impact of your class position on your academic learning, since the same quality of education is available, and it is available free of cost to all the population. So the class divide in learning can be addressed, and there are no other ways of addressing it. And if you see the example of G20 countries, the countries that are highly developed, they did achieve the level of development because they invested hugely in their school education for majority of population. But in India, we are not seeing the same situation. And here, the private schools growth rate is much higher than the government school, So the government schools are shrinking, enrollment is shrinking because the quality is not comparable, So the parents, those who are able, parents are concerned about their child's educational attainment. So whenever they afford, they can afford the private school tuition or the coaching, they pull out their kids from the government schools and then enroll them in the private schools. So the private schools growth rate are much higher. There are several reports which says that than the government schools. Like take the example of the Uttar Pradesh, my state. Uttar Pradesh is not a rich state. It's a relatively poor state, And here it's a rather old data, is a pre-pandemic data, is a 2018 data. 52.8% of the elementary students are enrolled in the private schools. So nearly more than half of the students at the level of elementary education, they are already studying in the private school, So the students, those who are studying in the government schools, they are not getting the same quality of education as the students, as they are the counterpart, those who are in the private schools. So this class divide can only be addressed when we raise the standard or we improve the funding of the government schools, state funding, because the private schools, they operate on the profit motive, So the market is a business model. So, and private schools, only those students can attend private schools, those who have, whose parents have the purchasing power to buy that education. So, and this class divide, like if I talk about intersection, as I said, that intersection, let's discuss a little bit about the intersection with the same example. So say, for example, when I said that the poor students are studying in government school. But if you see the intersection of class and gender, you will find the more girls are enrolled in the government school, than the private school. Because when the parents have limited resources and they have to educate, they have the responsibility to educate more than one child. So the child's gender decide which child goes to which kind of schools. So mostly boys go to the private schools, and the girls are enrolled in the government schools or the religious denomination schools, which is free of cost, which is locally available. So and there is a very clear-cut data over the year. I did a study and it's published on the gender difference in the private schools enrollment rate. And the private schools enrollment rate, boys percentage, enrollment percentage is 10 to 12% higher than the girls. In the government school, girls enrollment rate is 1 to 2% higher than the boys. So the girls are slightly higher in number in the government school, but they are significantly less number in the private schools, you know. So this class and gender here operates like if you are poor and if you are a female, you know, so your opportunity to get good quality education, good quality, I'm saying quote, English medium education or English education is less than if you are a male and a poor. So a poor male child has slightly little bit advantage due to his gender than the poor female. The same way you can see the caste and class intersection also. Most of the Government of India data shows that most of the BPL families, the poor families, like those who are in the class position, those who are poor, they happen to be the scheduled caste, the backward caste, and the scheduled tribe. So your caste position and your class position have intersection, like poor people happen to be the low caste or the marginalized people on the account of caste, because the caste operation, the history of caste operation doesn't have only the ideological base, it has a material base also. So like a whole lot of Dalit, they were not allowed to cultivate land, to hold land, you know. So that's why it has a historical operation, the history of operation, which today you can see the impact of the intersection of the caste and class. So I'm not saying all scheduled class people are the poor people. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that most of the poor, those who are poor, as per your government data record, most of them, those who are poor, they happen to be the lower caste people also. So it has its intersection, and it creates a kind of opportunity gap, and it creates a kind of reason to ensure equity, you know. It's a very high time we should talk these things and address these things about. So let's briefly discuss the NEP 2020 recommendations regarding equitable and inclusive education. There are various, it's a report is not brief. This NEP 2020 is only 68-page commission report. Certain sections recommendations are devoted, which address the equitable and inclusive education. And I just quote it. Page number 26, it talks about the socioeconomically disadvantaged group. And within that it talks about the education of girls. So this policy additionally recognizes the special and critical role women can play. So it understands, or it emphasizes, it underline the intersection of girls and the poor. So like if you are a poor and if you are a girl, you are doubly disadvantaged, because you are disadvantaged on the account of gender, and you are disadvantaged on the account of class also, and the caste also. So it talks about we should focus, this policy should focus on these people's education. One of the most talked recommendation and the touted recommendation of this NEP 2020 is it talks about universal education for started from 3 years to 18 years. like 15 years of schooling, and says that the compulsory access to high quality and equitable schooling from early childhood care and education through higher secondary education. Though the RT Act is not amended, as we know that, so it's not legally binding, you know, it's an intention, it's a recommendation which is done by the NEP, but it is not binding on the states. So let's see how they restructure the entire existing education program to ensure this 3 years of pre-service, like preschool education or early childhood education. And I'm sure you have seen these structures before also. It's highly commendable, because most of the urban middle class students, when they start grade 1, they have a prior exposure to private early child education also. So they have attended preschools, kindergarten, etc. And the poor student, those who start exactly from the grade 1 at the age of 6 and without any prior schooling experience, they lag behind. So in order to address that inequity, this policy, NEP 2020, they say that we'll restructure this entire thing, and we'll provide the pre-primary education in the form of early childhood care and education as a foundational stage. So the 3 years of primary education, and they have taken 2 years from the primary schooling, and they say that it will be foundational. But the additional 3 years which they are introducing in NEP 2020 and obviously those who are not attending pre-primary education, they are mostly rural poor or poor people. Most of the, like you can see the proliferation of the pre-primary education, private pre-primary education in urban area, and most of the upper middle class, urban well-to-do students, they attend like 1 or 2 years of pre-primary education before they start the grade 1, you know. So they say that, yes, it's very commendable recommendation, but instead of providing the additional funding and extra schooling year and the teachers, this NEP 2020 says that this 3 years of pre-primary education will be provided through Anganwadi, Balvatika, and preschools. Like you must have seen the structure of Anganwadi and the Anganwadi workers. Anganwadi workers are not trained to handle the pre-primary education or to teach them. Mostly they are the workers, or the women, primarily Anganwadi workers. They are they have the like limited education to have the kids, working class kids, at the 1 or 2 room structure, keep them and provide them some nutritional food provided by the governments. And there is no provision of teaching them as the students, those who are attending pre-primary kindergarten schools. So it is a kind of the NEP, at the one hand, it recommends that, yes, we need 3 years of universal schooling, 3 years of pre-primary schooling should be universal, it should be made universal in order to ensure the inequity. But on the second hand, on the other hand, it is not providing, like we need additional teachers, we'll need additional classroom, we'll need additional infrastructure to address this problem. So existing Anganwadis are not equipped, and I doubt that they'll do the justice of providing good quality or comparable quality of pre-primary education to. And as far as the North Indian Anganwadis are concerned, the Anganwadis are located in North India, and they are not equipped to deal with the pedagogical issues or the teaching issues as of now. Expenditure of education, as I said, that we need additional classes, we need teachers training, we need infrastructure, even like only for these 3 years, if you want to address that, we need a lot of funding. In the absence of funding, we can't do that. Let's see the expenditure on education as a percentage of GNP. Earlier it was called gross national product. Now it is called GDP, gross domestic product. And I gave you the data right from the planned development phase we started in 51, 52. And you can see that the maximum we spend in this slide, like it's 92, 93, we spend 3.57% of our GNP. In this slide, the maximum spending is 4.38% in 99. And gradual, like you can see that there's a lot of up and down, but we never ever cross we never ever touch the 6% of GDP, which should be spent on education, and which is recommended by several committees, right from the Mudalir Commission to Kothari Commission. Like if you see this, this government, the current central government from 2014, if you can see that it's a stagnant, like 3% was allocated, but actual expenditure is 2.8%, 2.7%, so 3%. We are shy away, like, so these are the government data and these are the government spending data. So in repeated recommendations, Kothari Commission, National Education Policy, Program of Action, NEP Revision, Saikia Committee, Tapas Majumdar Committee, CABE Committee, and now NP 2020 also says that Government of India should spend 6% of its GDP share on education. But as I have shown you that we have never ever did that. And I'm not seeing any indication after NEP 2020 that the Government of India is going to increase the educational funding. And constantly we are seeing a lot of crunch. So that's why I just highlighted this thing, that even in order to ensure a small kind of inequity in terms of the pre-primary education, the kind of provision we made is not sufficient, because any educational good intentions in terms of policy, which are expressed in the educational policy documents, they need a careful planning, they need a budget allocation, and then the agencies or nodal agency to implement those things. So in the absence of that, it becomes a kind of, it's a good intention, but difficult to execute or implement. Sources of inequity in learning. As I said that, one more source of inequity is the language inequity, and we can talk about home and school language gap. The child home language is different from the school language, and it is all the children, those who attend English medium schools, and at home, their parents or in their family, no one speaks English. They face a kind of language gap. But the children, those who attend English medium schools, mostly they need an assistance, to bridge the gap. But the student, but the language gap is never not only between the Hindi and English or the regional language and English. Sometimes language gap, India is a very linguistically diverse country. And sometimes the student face the language gap when they have very different spoken language than the standard curricular language of the state. Say, for example, the standard curricular language of the UP is a Hindi, and that Hindi is quite Sanskritized, very, very Sanskritized Hindi. The students, those who speak Bhojpuri, Braj, or Awadhi at home, they make a lot of mistakes. They find a kind of gap between the standard curricular language of the schools and in which they are supposed to excel, in which they are supposed to write their exams, in which the textbooks are written. They find it really difficult. And the schools do not try to bridge the gap because the students, those who do not speak that language, they are at a disadvantage. Like the Odisha is an example, the stark example. There are a lot of a sizable portion of students in Odisha, the tribal students particularly, the Santhali, they speak, but the language of standard curricular language is Odia. So the students, those who do not speak the Odia, read and write Odia, they face kind of gap. So NEP talks about this language gap also. And they say that the bilingual textbooks will be there, so on and so forth. The recommendation is very noble, good. But in the absence of, as I said, the funding, bilingual textbooks would be expensive. Who will write, who will publish, number of pages will be increased. Then there's the issue of teachers training. We require teachers, those who can bridge the gap, those who are trained to bridge the gap from the spoken language to written language. So it is an ideal situation to impart education in home language. And we need bridging the gap, the language gap, through language coaching. And we need pre-service teacher education, as I say that. They should be trained how to bridge the gap. There are methods, there are ways to do that. But are teachers willing, are teachers equipped, are our policies, or is our policy mandate all the schools to do that? So, as I said, the NEP also talks about this language gap, and it says that whenever there is possible, we'll provide the home language or local language or mother tongue school. And one of the possible solution they provided, they said that we should have bilingual textbooks. As it says, it's really good. It's very commendable recommendation, and they should be written in mother tongue or local language or in English. But as I said that, the policy says that bilingual textbooks will be there or the state will, but I haven't seen any state government, particularly if I'm looking closely at the central level and at the UP, they are, who will do that? Like who will translate, who will provide, what are the budgets? So it's like that. It's very noble, but as an educationist, as a practitioner, just look at where are the bilingual textbooks. And if there are no bilingual textbooks, we are not addressing the inequity which arises due to the language gap, you know. Then there is epistemic inequality or epistemic inequity. The third thing, like earlier two things, policy required, funding required from the state, but this epistemic inequality is, yeah, obviously policy is required, funding is required, teachers training is required, but something it can be done at the individual teacher level also, teachers level also. And let us first understand what is epistemic inequality. I do not deal here epistemology with a very detail, and I assume that you people are aware with the epistemology and how it operates. Like, let us try to understand this first, and then how it creates a kind of source of inequity. Learning experiences within the schools are designed primarily from the vantage point of urban middle class. And marginalized section students are forced to identify with these visuals and symbols and the ways of knowing, which are embedded in the textbooks, which are embedded in the evaluation practice, and which are embedded in the everyday culture of the schools. You know, so our school life or our school curriculum, our school textbooks are designed from the vantage point of urban middle class. And the marginal section students are forced to identify with this. And that's why it creates a kind of epistemic inequality. The students from the urban middle class, they find that their life, their language, the life symbols are the school's life, school's language also. So they don't find any stark difference between their reality and the school's reality. But the students from marginal section who do not share the same language, same visual, same symbols, same vantage point, they find school life is altogether a different life, you know. Let me give you one or two examples to make you clear that how it's a very abstract concept, epistemic inequality. And here is an example of gendered message from, it's a private publisher textbook, grade 1. It's a Either it's English or EVS, it must be coded somewhere. And if you see at the surface level, there is no problem with this this image or message, and it seems fine. But if you look deeper or read between the line and read beyond what is written there, you can see that there are very gendered coded message or expectations which is there, which is given. The way Lena describes her father and the way father is being portrayed, having a leisure time, sitting on a sofa and reading newspaper, and the kind of responsibility he anchored, like he just loved and he brings toys, you know, as you say that, as you can see that. And the Lena describes like, she's my mother, she works in a school, she's a teacher, you know, she's a full-time teacher, and she is busy yet cheerful. I love my mother. She cooks tasty food. She helps me in my homework. So the way mother is portrayed, though she is a full-time teacher, she's not being portrayed as a in the school background, in the school setting. Instead, she is shown as a performing the household chores and duties. You know, this kind of very subtle messages gives the impression to the boys and girls, gradual impression, gradual over the years, like 12 or 13 years of schooling, that what kind of expectation a society and family has from the educated women and the men, you know. So the father is not being shown as a sharing the responsibility, household responsibility, which are important but which are unpaid, while the mother are exclusively being shown and written as a doing all the household responsibility, the care work, which is unpaid, but she is shouldering the double burden kind of thing. So this kind of messages, like the seamlessly they are merging this. So when a girl is seeing this kind of message, she understands that what kind of expectation is being done, though not in a very explicit manner, but the way it is being coded, it has a very different kind of epistemic consequences on men and women both. And you will find it like it's a far-fetching, like Government of India says that, and it is a fact that International Labour Organization report says that the labor force participation rate of Indian women, Indian educated women, is one of the lowest in the world. You know, it is only 23% women participate in labor force. And the women constitute 46% of the GER of the higher education. So why, if women are so many women are getting higher education, so why they are not joining the labor force? Where are they? So the women drop a lot from workforce once they get married, or more when they get the first child. So why only women are dropping out of the workforce? The one is that the education aspiration and the vocational aspiration, we shape these kind of messages. So it creates a kind of epistemic inequality in a very subtle manner, but in a very larger frame of time. And it has a very solid consequences. Why Indian men are not sharing the responsibility, why we are not teaching Indian men to share the responsibility, why it is okay for only for a person to do all the care work. So these are very important things which are handled, which creates a kind of epistemic void or inequity or unequal message we provide them, you know. Like another example of epistemic inequality, as I said, that the school life is designed from the vantage point of the urban middle class. I'm sure you must have written an essay, or it's an example of schoolwork. I have taken an example of schoolwork. Write an essay on cow, your train journey or your vacation, you know, and we provide it. We give this kind of homework or schoolwork to all the students to do that, and without understanding that cow is not the reality of all the students' life, you know. So the student, those who have seen cow, or those who have cow at their home, they have a very advantageous vantage point. Instead of saying that write an essay on cow, because here you are not teaching cow, here you are these language works. The purpose of these kind of school work is that you want your students to develop their language ability, to write their observation, you know. And that's why you are giving them these kind of like write 10 lines on the cow or write 10 lines on your train journey or an essay. So you can, so many students in India, they may not have undergone like train journey. It's a reality, so many students or the families, they have never ever been on train. So how can a child write on the train journey? Or vacation is a concept, so many students. Instead of that kind of schoolwork, which is designed from the urban middle class vantage point, a teacher can design the classwork or schoolwork in a manner, in an alternative tweaking. You can just tweak this thing a little bit and you will facilitate a kind of epistemic level playing field or epistemic equality for all the students. Like you can say that write an essay on any animal or any pet animal you have seen. Okay. And now you have, by just tweaking and altering your schoolwork, you created a kind of field, level playing field for the students. So a student who has pig at home or who has goat or never ever have any animal at home, but have seen the animal in the street or in the field, they can do that. So while insisting cow, you are insisting like a hegemonic perspective. When you are saying your train journey, you can write any journey, the journey you have taken. And this journey may be from your street to the local fair, to the pond, to the river, anywhere, Instead of saying that write on a vacation, you can say, what did you do in a summer, or in a holiday? You can do anything on a holiday, like you can help your parents on your farm, or if your parents work self-employed, you can help them. So those kind of things, I say that when the child from the marginal section who haven't had any train journey or vacation or at the camp, they are forced to identify and they are forced to write, they are forced to cram, So then there are the books, there are 10 lines on train journey, and then they cram. And the student, those who have had this train journey, they have a vantage point and they find that, yes, my life is reflected in the school, in the textbook, in the evaluation practice, in the schoolwork. Whereas the other child finds that his life, because he did work as a laborer, as an assistant laborer with his parents, or he helped his father's tea shop kind of thing. So this epistemic inequality, a teacher can address it, unless and until we educate teachers to see these things, like how their actions and designing of schoolwork and classwork create an epistemic inequality. So, as I said that. So, thank you. So these are the sources of inequity. Some of them can be addressed by the teacher training or individual teacher. When I address these issues in seminar, and this is also kind of in-service education for teachers. So it can be done at the individual level. It can be done at the policy level, like if it is incorporated in the pre-service or in-service teacher education program. But certain things are beyond our individual teachers' capacity, like policy and funding, So those inequity of learning, though it is required, it is very much needed, but we are not seeing enough being done on the ground from the government side. Thank you all for your patient hearing. If you have any question or observation.